Reading that letter made me think about another letter I had read from another parent. And it's another letter that I find to be just an incredible guide to not only to parenting, but to living. And this one was written not by a father, but by a mother. And it's not a letter to a son, but to a daughter. And the daughter's name was Jana. And the mother's name was Dr. Mialda Horokova. And she wrote the letter from prison while she was on trial for treason and for conspiracy, on trial by the Soviet-backed communist government of Czechoslovakia after they had taken control of the country in a coup. And she and her fellow so-called conspirators were jailed and tortured and then put through a grandiose show trial. And she knew. She knew that she was going to be made an example of. She knew she was facing death. And the night before her execution, she wrote a letter to her daughter, who was 16 at the time. And this is some of what she wrote. My only little girl, Jana. God blessed my life as a woman with you. As your father wrote in the poem from German prison, God gave you to us because he loved us. Apart from your father's magic, amazing love, you were the greatest gift I received from fate. However, Providence planned my life in such a way that I could not give you nearly all that my mind and heart had prepared for you. The reason was not that I loved you little. I love you just as purely and fervently as other mothers love their children. But I understood that my task here in the world was to do you good by seeing to it that life becomes better and that all children can live well. And therefore, we often had to be apart for a long time. It is now already for the second time that fate has torn us apart. Don't be frightened and sad because I am not coming back anymore. Learn, my child, to look at life early as a serious matter. Life is hard. It does not pamper anybody, and for every time it strokes you, it gives you 10 blows. Become accustomed to that soon, but don't let it defeat you. Decide to fight. Have courage and clear goals, and you will win over life. Much is still unclear to your young mind, and I don't have time left to explain to you things you would still like to ask me. One day when you grow up, you will wonder why your mother, who loved you and whose greatest gift you were, managed her life so strangely. Perhaps then you will find the right solution to this problem, perhaps a better one than I could give you today myself. Of course, you will not only be able to solve it correctly and truthfully by knowing very, very much, not only from books, but from people. Learn from everybody, no matter how unimportant. Go through the world with open eyes and listen not only to your own pains and interests, but also to the pains, interests, and longings of others. Don't ever think of anything as none of your business. No, everything must interest you, and you should reflect about everything, compare and compose individual phenomena. Man doesn't live in the world alone. In that, there is great happiness, but also a tremendous responsibility. That obligation is first of all in not being and acting exclusive, but rather merging with the needs and the goals of others. This does not mean to be lost in the multitude, but it is to know that I am part of all and to bring one's best into that community. If you do that, you will succeed in contributing to the common goals of human society. Be more aware of one principle than I have been. Approach everything in life constructively. Beware of unnecessary negation. I'm not saying all negation, because I believe that one should resist evil. But in order to be a truly positive person in all circumstances, one has to learn how to distinguish real gold from tinsel. It is hard because tinsel sometimes glitters so dazzlingly. I confess, my child, that often in my life I was dazzled by glitter. And sometimes it even shone so falsely that one dropped pure gold from one's hand and reached for or ran after false gold. You know that to organize one's scales of values means to know not only oneself well, but to be firm in the analysis of one's character, but also to know others, to know as much as possible of the world, its past, its present, and future. In short, to understand. Not to close one's ears before anything and for no reason. Not even to shut out the thoughts and opinions of anybody who stepped on my toes or even wounded me deeply. Examine. Think. Criticize. Yes, mainly criticize yourself. Don't be ashamed to admit a truth you have come to realize, even though you proclaimed the opposite a little while ago. Don't become obstinate about your opinions. But when you come to consider something right, then be so definite that you can fight and die for it. As Walker said, death is not bad. Just avoid gradual dying, which is what happens when one suddenly finds oneself apart from the real life of others. You have to put down your roots where fate has determined for you to live. You have to find your own way. Look for it independently. Don't let anything turn you away from it, not even the memory of your mother and father. If you really love them, you won't hurt them by seeing them critically. Just don't go on a road which is wrong, dishonest, and does not harmonize with life. I have changed my mind many times, rearranged many values, but what was left as an essential value, without which I cannot imagine my life, is the freedom of my conscience. I would like you, my little girl, to think about whether I was right. Another value is work. I don't know which to assign the first place and which the second. Learn to love work. Any work, but one you have to really to know really and thoroughly, then don't be afraid of anything, and things will turn out well for you. And don't forget about love in your life. I'm not only thinking of the red blossom which one day will bloom in your heart, and you, if fate favors you, will find a similar one in the heart of another person with whose road yours will merge. I'm thinking of love without which one cannot live happily. And don't ever crumble love. Learn to give it whole and really. And learn to love precisely those who encourage love so little. My little girl Jana, when you will be choosing for whom your maiden heart shall burn and to whom to really give yourself, remember your father. I don't know if you will meet with such luck as I. I don't know if you will meet such a beautiful human being, but choose your ideal close to him. Perhaps you, my little one, have already begun to understand, and now perhaps you understand to the point of pain what we have lost in him. What I find hardest to bear is that I am also guilty of that loss. I've heard from my legal representative that you are doing well in school and that you want to continue. I was very pleased. But even if you would one day have to leave school and work for your livelihood, don't stop learning and studying. If you really want to, you will reach your goal. I would have liked for you to become a medical doctor. You remember that we talked about it. Of course, you will decide yourself, and circumstances will too. But if you stand one day in the traditional alma mater and carry home from graduation not only your doctor's diploma, but also the real ability to bring people relief as a doctor, then, my little girl, your mother will be immensely pleased. But your mother would only be truly happy no matter where you stand. Whether at the operating table, at the lathe, at your child's cradle, or at the work table in your household. If you will do your work skillfully, honestly, happily, and with your whole being, then you will be successful in it. Don't be demanding in life, but have high goals. They are not exclusive of each other. For what I call demanding are those selfish notions and needs. Restrict them from yourself. Realize that in view of the disaster and sorrow which happened to you, Vera, Pepik, grandmother and grandfather, and many others will try to give you what they have and what they cannot afford. You should not only not ask for it, but learn to be modest. If you become used to it, you will not be unhappy because of material things you don't have. You don't know how free one feels if one trains oneself in modesty. How he or she gets a head start over against the feeble, and by how much one is safer and stronger. I really tried this out on myself, and if you can thus double your strength, you can set yourself courageous, high goals. Read much and study languages. You will thereby broaden your life and multiply its content. There was a time in my life when I read voraciously, and then again times when work did not permit me to take a single book in my hand apart from professional literature. That was a shame. Here in recent months I've been reading a lot, even books which probably would not interest me outside. But it is a big, important task to read everything valuable, or at least much that is. I shall write down for you at the end of this letter what I have read in recent months. I'm sure you will think of me when you will be reading it. And now also something for your body. I am glad that you are engaged in sports. Just do it systematically. I think that there should be rhythmic exercises, and if you have time also, some good systematic gymnastics. And those quarter hours every morning. Believe me, finally, that it would save you a lot of annoyance about unfavorable proportions of your waist if you could really do it. It is also good for the training of your will and perseverance. Your photograph showed me your new hairdo. It looks good, but isn't it a shame to hide your nice forehead? And that lady in the ball gown, really, you look lovely. But your mother's eye noticed one fault, which may be due to the way you were placed on the photograph. Wasn't the neck opening a little deep for your 16 years? Don't primp. But whenever possible, dress carefully and neatly. Jana, please take good care of grandfather and grandmother. Their old hearts now need the most consolation. Visit them often and let them tell you about your father's and mother's youth so that you can preserve it in your mind for your children. In that way, an individual becomes immortal, and we shall continue in you and the others of your blood. And one more thing, music. I believe you will show your gratitude to grandfather for the piano which he gave you by practicing honestly, and that you will succeed in what Pepik wants so much in accompanying him when he plays the violin or the viola. Please do him that favor. I know that it would mean a lot to him, and it would be beautiful. And when you can play well together, play me the aria from Martha. My rose, you bloom alone there on the hillside, and then sleep, my little prince, by Mozart. And then your father's favorite, Under Your Window, by Chopin. You'll play it for me, won't you? I shall always be listening to you. Just one more thing. Choose your friends carefully. Among other things, one is also very much determined by the people with whom one associates. Therefore, choose very carefully. Be careful in everything and listen to the opinions of others about your girlfriends without being told. I shall never forget your charming letter, today I can tell you, which you once in the evening pinned to my pillow to apologize when I caught you for the first time at the gate in the company of a girl and a boy. You explained to me at that time why it is necessary to have a gang. Have your gang, little girl, but of good and clean young people. And compete with each other in everything good. Only please don't confuse young people's springtime infatuation with real love. Do you understand me? If you don't, Aunt Vera will help you explain what I meant. And so, my only young daughter, little girl Jana, new life, my hope, my future forgiveness. Live. Grasp life with both hands. Until my last breath, I shall pray for your happiness, my dear child. I kiss your hair, eyes, and mouth. I stroke you and hold you in my arms. I shall always be with you. And the next day, despite international outcry, Milada Horokova was executed at Prague's Pankrak prison. And again, there's just so much to be learned from those letters. And as parents, there's so much for us to teach. And I think the thing that hits me is that these are all things that we know. We know them. We know to take care of our health. We know to wake up and exercise. We know we should choose our friends carefully. We know we should be our own worst critics. And we know that if we have been wrong about something, we should simply admit that and move our minds to what is right and what is correct. We know we should work hard and help people. We know the value of freedom. And we know that freedom must be fought for. And we know that we should be brave and that is possible only through a strong body, mind, and heart. And we know all those things. We know them. Now, teach them. Teach them and live them. Set the right example by living them. Because our children are watching. They're watching. And you know, I think you have to do more than just set the example. I think you actually have to tell them. I think you actually have to tell them. And you think about the power of these letters, the power of these words, but it's also a real challenge with kids, with your own children. It's a challenge because there's a whole crazy parental child psychology that's going on here, right? You got the rebellion, or the trying to please you, or the competing for attention, or the I can't do anything good enough. You got all these psychological things that are going on with your kids, and it's hard. It can be very hard just to be straight with your kids about stuff. It can be hard not to micromanage them. That's one of the hardest things because you know so well all these things that we just talked about. You know them, and you know that they're the best things for your kids. And yet if you push them too intensely, they're going to push back. Or they're going to head in a different direction because you pushed them there. But I do think that there's some real value in taking the time to explain what you've learned, the mistakes that you've made. And I think it's key not to so much focus on telling them how to live. I think this is the key, is not so much focus on telling them how to live, but telling them how you have lived, the mistakes that you've made, and how you try to live. So that maybe they can learn from some of the mistakes that you've made without having to learn from life itself, which sometimes life is a much more brutal teacher. In fact, most of the time. And if you have to learn from life, sometimes you don't win. Harsh.
Yeah.
Parenting is challenging.
Part that I think is very important. The most important, maybe, is when you said our children are watching.
Mm-hmm.
So you know how, remember the old saying, do what I say, not what I do.
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
No.
Because you tell someone, hey, don't, I don't know, don't smoke.
Yeah.
Don't try cigarettes. Meanwhile, you smoke.
Yeah, it's not gonna
They're gonna be like, okay, don't try cigarettes. Whatever. They're always like every day, all day, every day. They're watching to see, how do I act? I don't know how to. I'm a kid. I don't know how to act. I don't know what to do in this whole. You know how like when you walk into a party of someone you don't know, and maybe it's a really nice party or something, and maybe it's a different culture or something like that. You're looking around. What do I act? Are we taking off our shoes right here? Okay, we're taking off our shoes. Okay, are we eating now? Are we waiting for a prayer or something? What do we do? You're constantly looking on how to act. Now, kids, that's their whole life.
Yeah.
How do I act? I don't know how to act. So, of course, you're there the whole time. You got things figured out. You got a car. You got a house. You're providing my food. You're gonna show me how to act.
Yeah.
So you start saying, hey, don't smoke. Meanwhile, 100% of the time, you're acting in a way that allows for smoking. You'd be like, okay, we're smoking.
And by the way, it's the same exact thing from a leadership perspective.
Yeah.
The way you act as a leader, it's not, you're not going to have people that are as moldable as a kid is, but there's no doubt if the way you act as a leader is the way your team's going to act. That's 100%.
Yeah.
And if you act like a clown, your team is going to act like clowns.
Yeah.
If you take your job seriously, your team is going to take your job seriously. If you're very well balanced in between those two, where you take your job seriously, but you still have a good time with doing it, your team is going to follow you with that as well.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a new guy in a SEAL platoon, I would be watching my leaders all the time and taking, when they didn't do something, when they didn't hold the line, when they were late or didn't bring the right piece of gear, it was just...
Yeah.
You just look at them and shake your head. Now, I wanted to perform, but what that meant to other people is like, see, doesn't matter if we really perform that well. Look, the boss doesn't even perform well.
Yeah. And
so you're setting that example. Yeah, your subordinates are watching.
Yeah, everybody's watching. That's
everybody's
the thing.
watching.
You know how people will be like, hey, I'm the type of person that does this. And everyone knows, Brad, no, you're not. We've been watching you the whole time I've known you, kind of thing. So yeah, especially like the boss too. Even you get all kinds of different people, right, in a work environment. So you're like driven. It comes from yourself. You're like really motivated and stuff.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So let's say, even if you have a bunch of self-motivated people, they're still watching you. Like, so if you're like kind of the leader and you're like, hey, we're punctual people, we get our work done early, like we're this guy, and then meanwhile you're coming in late or whatever, the boss is coming in late and he's slacking. You can tell he's slacking. He's passing like his job off, onto others and that kind of stuff. At the very least, they're gonna look at you and not have the respect that I think you should have as a boss or whatever.
Yeah.
At the very least, and that's if you have self-motivated people. But otherwise, the normal situation, I remember feeling that all the time. Where it's like, bro, I'm not gonna listen to this guy, man.
Yeah, man. It's what's interesting too is just think about. And I know we've done other letters from parents, especially from parents that are, headed for death or at least a high probability of death.
Yeah.
But what would you say to your kids if you knew you were heading there? And is it not worth telling them that at some point while you're alive?
Yeah.
And you can say, hey, look, if I'm alive to tell you this stuff, this is what I want you to know. Again, now what's crazy is even with that, you can't override your kids with act this way. You can't do that. You got to approach it. You got to flank them. You got to flank them. I got to flank my kids. My kid, they're not. I think the classic example is my son.
Mm.
He's good at jiu-jitsu, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's been training jiu-jitsu for 10 years,
Dang.
right? He's 14. He's been training his whole life, right?
Dang.
But he's not as good at jiu-jitsu as I am. I mean, he's just not, because he's been training for 10. I've been training for 20-something.
Yeah, so you can beat him.
I can beat him, yes.
Solid.
But check it out. What's funny is I'm his dad.
Mm-hmm.
So when I tell him, hey, son, move your hips over here. He's, dude, you don't need to do that. I'm thinking to myself, you've got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. That is to me, that's the ultimate example of your kids are not going to listen to you. They're programmed. Yeah. They're programmed to reject you at some point. They have to move on, right? Mm-hmm. That's the way the species works. If they just continue to take from you and they don't reject you at some point and get away from you, then you didn't do a good job as a parent, because now they're relying on you. So, but that comes a little price. The price is the rebellion, right? The rebellion's going to come, and it's, you can identify it. My youngest, it's so nice. You tell her something and she's just got the big eyes and she wants to help and wants to please and wants to do and understands. And I'll tell you something else. There's another end of the spectrum too, because my oldest daughter, she went through the rebellion. She's already through that. And she got through it pretty quickly, to where she would like look at me and think you could see it in her eyes that she's thinking, he knows what he's talking about and I'm going to listen to what he's saying. Now it's probably like a 50% right there. It's not 100%. I'm not just dialing in 100% victory on telling her what to do, because otherwise, what's sad about that? This is what's horrible about that. If you could get a child to actually do everything that you wanted them to do, they would dominate in life. Right? Because you would just say, okay, I want you to study hard. I want you to work out. I want you to do everything that I'm not doing because I'm lazy and I fell short of my own goals. Right. You'd have them do all that stuff. They're not going to do it. So you got to flank them. You also got to figure out which ones are important. Right? Which ones are really important. Don't waste your leadership capital on, getting your kids to dress a certain way, right? That's one. Parents will spend all kinds of leadership capital on getting their kids to dress a certain way. And the reality is, obviously you gotta maintain some standard of decency and cleanliness.
That's another lead by example situation.
Yeah, it is. My daughters went through a little phase of wearing the really short jeans, or not jeans, but shorts. I was like, okay, cool. I was walking around one day at my house. I had like a pair of workout shorts on or whatever. I just pulled them right up. And was just walking around. How do I look? Hey, if we're going to show off, let's just show it off. Hey, I got a little something too. I do squats. Check me out. The girls collapsed in agony.
I'm almost collapsing.
Stop. Dad, stop. No, that's disgusting. Hey, if we're showing off butts, let's show them off. Like I said, I'm over here on the squat rack. Let's sport it. Got it, flaunt it. You apparently are flaunting it, so let's all flaunt it. Let's go into town. Who's coming with me?
Nah, man.
No. But you can only spend so much leadership capital on getting these minor corrections made. What you want to make sure is that they have good morals and values, so they go out in town, they know where to draw the line on doing stuff that's good or not good. Somebody asked me a question on Twitter. I didn't actually answer it fully, but he's like, hey, you seem to be real black and white about good or evil, but I think there's a lot of shades of gray in there, and I totally agree, of course. I mean, there's massive amounts of shades of gray in good and evil. And then at some point you get to evil. Like you go from like, hey, this is bad, to evil, and you go from, hey, that's pretty nice, to good. Those are things that exist. And you want to keep your kids out of the evil. Right? And if you waste all your leadership capital trying to push them from doing okay into good and doing the best, and you're gonna wear it all out, in my opinion. If there's some parents that have done a better job than me, that's awesome. And they were able to keep their kid 5.0 in every category across the board for their whole existence without the kid turning into a crazy, rebel. Because that's what happens to some kids that get pushed that hard.
Yeah, I think that whole leading by example thing, man, is like, as long as you're consistent and you lead by example, they can see, they'll see the benefits play out right in front of their face.
Yeah.
But man, again, you can't be like, hey, clean your room. Meanwhile, the rest of the house, including your room, is messy. And I tell you to clean your room all the time. You never do it. No, how's this? So one of my friends, one of my best friends, named Scotty Lewis. He's a cop, by the way, on the Big Island. So this guy would, he was never my roommate, but I go to his house all the time, and he was real like clean. He's a super clean guy, and he'd get kind of not mad, but just uncomfortable when things are dirty. So if he has a roommate or something like that. And I remember thinking, dang, bro, Scotty, you're real sensitive about that whole thing, being clean. And they're like, for real clean. A clean. Not a clean freak necessarily, but almost. Borderline, yes. So, and just from knowing him and stuff, I knew that his parents, they would like, clean his room and stuff like that. Not all the time or nothing like that, but they were involved in cleaning and stuff. So it kind of went opposite to what I thought. You know how like if you got taught to clean your room from a young age and you had to do it the whole time. Yeah. I always thought that that would carry over when you're out of the house and you go to college, you go live on your own, that you'd clean your room all the time. I thought that was kind of it. But I started to hypothesize that that's not it. This is what it is. If your parents provide an environment of extreme cleanliness, whether you do it or they do it or both or whatever, but the environment is consistently clean. When you leave that environment, that'll be what you're used to. Interesting. So it'll mess with you if it's not. And sure enough, we went to the Big Island, cruise with him. And we go to his house, and it's like a museum, just spotless, clean, not his parents' house. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking like, that my little theory I think is correct. Yeah. Like if you're used to cleanliness. So did his parents help him clean or not? Yes, fully. So here's the thing about
because you could also get the kid that the parents are neat freaks and the kid rebels and just becomes a slob.
Yeah. So maybe. Right? And I'm sure there's all kinds of circumstances that maybe do that, I'm sure. But I mean, generally speaking, the environment that you get used to functioning
in. And also there's parents that are slobs that the kids are very neat and orderly because they don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe. And again, these are all, I'm sure there's so many I've never encountered that.
Well, I think the key is here, what you can't do is just try and push them like crazy. You just have to guide them in what is correct. Yeah. And what you have to really show is like the benefits of why it's good to keep things in order. Yeah. If you're going to spend an hour looking for your car keys, just think of your productivity at that point. It's nil. Yeah. Yeah. So you got to watch out for that.
Yeah. But that was my little hypothesis. I think it's true though. Cause think about just the environment of the consistent environment that you someone will come from. They always, in a way, sort of for lack of a better term, recreate that environment or try to when they leave. So like, how like kids that come from a chaotic, people yell all the time. Yeah. They're going to probably yell a lot. Or let's say they don't yell. Let's say they never swear, right? Like I grew up in a household and they don't swear, and swearing's like not that good. When they go out, they won't just start swearing. They'll be sensitive to swearing. Yeah, for sure. That's how, For sure. So I think if that, again, if the environment is provided consistently, I think that's going to have a big
consistency goes a long way.
Bro, I think it's the number one thing.
Sarah Armstrong always says that.
Yeah, I agree with her 1,000,000,000%.
Be consistent.
Right, even like small little things like for my daughter, for example, it's the routine is when it's time to go to bed, it's brush teeth. We do stories and questions, which is like just some story that I made up, and then questions like basically a quiz. It's like rudimentary education, like solar system stuff, and you make it like a game show quiz. Nice. So it's fun, and then bedtime. That's it. Then sleep. 100%, no deviation unless we're out. So,
but that's how you roll.
That's the routine, consistent. So now I don't get any pushback, and my daughter is a pushback master.
She's got a strong will.
The consistent stuff, she just knows. She just go. You can be playing.
She's got a little spark to her. Yeah. Actually, she's got a lot of spark to her.
Yeah. Got it from mom.
Yeah, there's just a ton. As I was going through these, I don't remember where I read the. I don't remember where I read this letter for the first time from Milada Horokova, but there's so much good stuff in there. Choose your friends carefully. I mean, just when she's kicking it off, life is hard. It does not pamper anybody. That's a good thing for kids to understand.
Yeah.
Welcome to life. It's going to be hard. Get accustomed to it, but don't let it defeat you. Boom.
Yeah.
That's
the changing of your opinion one was really powerful in my opinion.
And admitting when you're wrong. Like, hey, if I made this, if I had the wrong theory, that's okay.
Yeah, in light of new information.
New information, here we go. I'm changing. That's okay. Yep. It always kind of freaked me out with politicians. I think we've had this conversation. We've had this conversation before. Yep. Politicians, people would say, oh, he's a flip-flopper.
Flip-flopper, yeah.
And that's a negative thing.
Right.
It's a negative thing if the person is flip-flopping just to get votes.
Yeah, and it's obvious.
But if new stuff comes to light and they say, you know what, I kind of changed my opinion on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Or the culture shifts, man. Like, there's certain things that's even, back to your thing with the short shorts, that's, the point here is a little bit different, but you have to contend with cultural shifts.
That's a new reality for me.
Like in Hawaii, for example, when I grew up, like just the swimsuits were, sure you wear a bikini, but it's like a normal bikini. Mm-hmm. So I go to college, I come here, I move here, I go back. This is like, 10, 11 years later. I'm noticing the bikinis in there is just way less material. And I'm like, dang, they're showing a lot, but everyone's just, little kids and stuff like that. I'm like, okay. And my younger brother who lives there, he said that's just how it is now. It's like, man, you wouldn't have got away with that. Yeah, so
that's some stuff that I had to go, okay, I'm not going to expend a bunch of leadership capital fighting not just my kids, but fighting culture as a whole.
Yeah, that's what
you mean. Then there's things that cross the line. Right?
Yeah, I'll tell you what it is. It's you wearing those short shorts. That's crossing the line.
Crossing the line. You don't want to see me in those short shorts.
No.
You don't want to have that happen.